So the question is, how can we create this strategic intelligence that orients and addresses the information? And it's not only responsibility from the people that create it, but also the people that organize it in order to make decisions, so it can also flow from the people who are making the decisions in the several institutions, and it flows towards the population, so it becomes a social capital and a territorial capital that will allow us to take advantage of all these resources. So the themes we have talked about and we will talk about are very, very broad, and it's a multidimensional space, and in the life of each and every one of us, we have a relationship and a participation with local processes, with processes from our community, from our environment, from our workplaces, our productive activities, and we can always be immersed in the creation of information that has a local basis. Now, this potential I'm talking about is also being studied from different standpoints. We have people that are experts who are involved in monitoring the environment, the climate change, hydrology, territorial planning, alternative sources of energy, transportation, safety, health, education, science, and technology. So as we can see, this is not an isolated field, the field of management and development of geospatial sciences, but this is a part of all the topics we address in our day-to-day life, and from the efforts of modern science as well. So, based on the scientific project and researches made in the Geo Center, we have developed approaches that will allow us to study and to improve our understanding on the vulnerability, the adaptation capabilities, resilience, and sustainability of the population, management of knowledge and geospatial information services are basic or paramount in order to address these processes. And you know, we have all these opportunities for technological development. Social participation in the creation of information is very important, and it leads us to participative mapping as one of the main work axes that has been developed, but that sets forth the need for this socially committed research. It sets forth links with the population that is involved, and the sense of the participation of this organized society and or in network of individuals that create and share local information in a global environment. So along these lines, scientific knowledge, both experimental and based on experience from local populations, must lead us. It must be a supplement in order to create the science that addresses the state of the ecosystems, the local traditional knowledge, and the integration of different kinds of qualitative, quantitative, and explicit knowledge in order to understand the processes of the systems we address. Social learning, then, is one of the most important commitments we have to turn the information into institutional knowledge, to turn the information into a relevant information in order to take action focused on strengthening the potential of the population and to provide adequate guidelines to decision makers in order to consolidate this potential. And we have seen this in recent times. We have to be more efficient, and this is a slide in which we see the orientation of participation focused on strategic intelligence, and the focus of geocybernetics is really allowing us to build the knowledge collectively, and it also allows for the feedback and the discussion between the stakeholders, and it also creates the opportunity, the pertinence, and the guidelines for these exchange platforms and the support for the decision making. The commitments are set forth from a conceptual framework based on geospatial knowledge and information, which would be a methodologic plan which would allow us to create the platforms and the methods and the models which will allow us to articulate this knowledge. And it is an institutional challenge so that us, the institutions, are able to carry out socially committed research and to have a possibility of feedback in order to address timely and pertinently the different emergencies and processes, change processes that are happening at all levels, and also the ethical challenge to really acknowledge that the crisis of the scientific knowledge and politics that is being transformed takes us many times to rethink about the ethic elements that should guide us in the efforts society makes from science and from the participation of the society. So that would be it for me. I thank you for your attention. La doctora Margarita Parás. Well, thank you, Dr. Margarita Parás, for that interesting speech. Now we will continue in this participative mapping panel. Our next speaker is Verónica Lerma Hernández. She will talk about the INA. She has a BA in Geography by the UNAM. She also studied in the National School of Anthropology and History. She has a diploma course in Geomatics from the UNAM as well. Spatial Infrastructures by the Geographic Institute, and she is responsible of the historical monuments and real estate for that coordination, and she's responsible of the spatial data project in the INA. She is highly experienced. She has mainly worked on production, management, analysis, and publishing of geographic information. and she published the digital interactive map with INA in collaboration with the Institute of Puebla. She also worked at the SNIEC, and she has spoken at different meetings and events on these topics. So please let's welcome Verónica Susana.
Hi, good morning. I'm representing the Anthropology National Institute and History Institute, and I'm going to show you and present to you a project that we are working on regarding spatial data infrastructure. How do we coordinate the production of information? I think it is important in this panel to talk about this experience. Because with this information, through this information, we can protect patrimony, which is one of the essential tasks of the Institute. I'm going to talk to you about the INA. The INA is the federal government institution that was founded in 1939, and it's dedicated to conserving the historic patrimony, the anthropologic and paleontologic in Mexico. In order to perform these tasks, the Institute performs investigation, and regarding archaeological patrimony and all the cultural patrimony things I talked about before, I mentioned before, the Institute is responsible for so many historical monuments that were built between centuries 18 and 19. They have over 29,000 archaeological zones in the whole country, and 180 archaeological sites that are open. 120 museums distributed throughout the national territory, and museums that go from a national matter, regional, or local, and community. In its research, there are over 800 people in history and anthropology and archaeology, linguistic and history, ethnology, architecture, patrimony conservation and restoration. There are 2 schools, the one in Mexico City and the National School for Conservation and Restoration and Museography, which is in Mexico City as well. Documents are kept in the National Anthropology Library. It also has publications and performs activities for through these publications, presentation of videograms, books, amongst others. With everything that the Institute handles, until a few years ago, we didn't have the precision of locating and knowing where this patrimony that is being conserved was. We had a series of areas that had been working isolated. So the intention of knowing that this institute has an issue, a project was proposed, and it was called Infrastructure for Spatial Data, which I'm going to show to you, and we will comment on it. The IDEINA is considered, or it was set as a technological system that will allow us to integrate all the different developments that regarding the production of geographical data were being worked on in the Institute. This in the interest of decision-making, with the protection for the patrimony were made adequately. As I was telling you, different areas have been developing this kind of work. As an example, we can mention in archaeology what has been worked on with the National Commission for Archaeology, a system that was called Geographical Information for the National Registry of Sites and Archaeological Zones. The archaeology area were the ones who developed widely proposals to manage this. In 2004, a project through one of the coordinations for the center was performed, because the Institute also has state delegations. Each one of the entities of the states of Mexico, and through the coordination, the national coordination for INA centers, a project was generated where we seeked to publish this information and to have access through the internet to the data that the Institute has generated. But this project was stopped because of several issues that happen in institutions, and we weren't able to continue with it. In 2006, we had the approach for a Geomatics Laboratory where what was proposed was to work in a central area and that all tasks were coordinated. This Geomatics Laboratory had this proposal, but we had some flaws and we weren't able to continue with it. And finally, as one of the examples, we have the Geographic Information System for Historical Monuments that begins in 2009. And nowadays, it continues to generate information. There are many efforts, and the issues that we were observing is that these were all inarticulate projects. Everyone was generating information on their own side. And the areas were duplicating activities, and they were stumbling upon each other because they didn't know what was being worked on in the different areas. We had uneven criterion for the production of mapping because the Institute didn't have specialized personnel for the production of these type of information. So what happened was the specialists in archaeology wanted to generate mapping information, but the technical elements weren't there in order to achieve it in an efficient way. And every area determined what was the way of producing its information. And this generated a problem in order to match all these elements. And of course, as a consequence, we had a duplicity in the activities. Activities were duplicated, expenses and efforts, because activities were performed in many areas. We hired services where things were being repeated in other areas, and this was a mismatch in all these projects. In 2012, we started with this idea, an approach, with the objectives of resolving all these issues, to coordinate and link all the different production for space data, to strengthen and drive the development of SIG in the different areas of the Institute. And a very important thing we found is, now that we have the information, how do we deploy it? So we considered this technological advance, what we needed to develop in order to be able to deploy all this mapping material. So we needed to develop applications that will allow the access, the search, and the visualization of all the spatial data. And in this subject, we consider that there are different type of users that will access the information. We have researchers with a very specialized profile, but on the other hand, we have citizens that are interested in knowing where a historic monument can be found, or an archaeological zone. And we thought it was very important to develop applications with different profiles that will allow us to reach people and to transfer information to researchers. And finally, as a part of this idea, we needed to establish this institutional framework, these regulatory documents that will provide stability to the project as a fundamental task of the Institute. What have we achieved so far? We have a website that is a geographic portal where we can access all the services related to the information generated by the Institute about cultural patrimony. Here's the link if you have a chance to look through it. We also generated an application that driven towards the specialist as a platform for geographical information system, which is called a mapping visualizer. And what you will find here is an interactive digital map where you can upload information about the patrimony, the cultural patrimony, and it can be accessed through a username and a password. And it has several tools and several levels of information management. For a guest user, for a specialized user, you can export data. And for a guest user, they can visualize information and build maps. Using the platform from Google, we designed this application where through its maps and their imagery, their satellite images, the information of patrimony can be seen, and you can find links on special themed maps where you can find museums, archaeological zones, and world patrimony zones. And information for the national catalog for historical monuments can be found, and each one of these documents have assigned numbers that will describe the patrimony. For example, for historical monuments, you can find photographies as well as descriptions for each one of the buildings. And we consider this to be very relevant for the citizens. If we do not deploy this information, it will be very difficult, and it is very difficult to conserve the patrimony, to preserve the patrimony. We need to educate the citizens, and we think that through these tools, it is easier to access the regular citizen, because through a map they can locate their home and know if it is a historical building. These are two applications that we have pending. This is a digital map with the Esri platform. One of the things we found is that licenses had been paid and weren't being used. So we used these resources in order to integrate and deploy the information. And finally, one of the services that we have and that we need to develop and present are the WMS services, where we can consult the INA information from our desks. And another element that was interesting to us and that we believe can help this project is the training of the Institute's personnel in order to manage the platforms. And we have been developing the training courses in the Institute, not only to be able to talk to them about specialized tools, but to talk to them about the types of services that they can use in their everyday work, and that they can find in this website. And finally, in the website you will be able to find this, which is a list of our mapping, of all our maps related to everything that has been generated, and that we have the interest that the people will know these things so that they can use them and the patrimony can be preserved. If you access the website, you will find this information as well. And finally, the INA link, which is the coordination for institutional development. Here's my information for this project. And our interest is to show and talk to you about this experience. It is very complicated to reach an agreement within an institution that until a little while ago, it was integrated to the management of geographical information, but we believe this is very relevant to protect the cultural patrimony. And that is it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Verónica, Lerma. We have a few minutes for questions. Go ahead. Good morning. For the PhD, my name is Enrique Muñoz from Biological. Using the concept of cyber mapping, particularly when the information comes from groups that work in the field, groups that are in the southeast, for example, we work in that area a lot. The way that these people get organized goes from very basic levels, using information maps, to organizations who have access to digital information. But sometimes these levels or ranks or of knowledge make it difficult for these participatory mapping to happen. So this information is a challenge. So I want to know what the success has been here. Thank you for your question. We now have a wide range of applications and of experiences of what participatory mapping can be. And recently, in the project in the Usumacinta region, a network of researchers that are able to generate with the local population processes that can be in the community and that will allow them with different resources to show and display their experience and their knowledge with the processes they're working on. The integration of technology is now something that will make it more accessible to have the methodology and the resources that can go from don't necessarily need to be computers, but that will allow the knowledge of the place to be expressed and have the possibility to participate through other resources that are being used nowadays, mobile resources, to have web applications for different types so that people can participate. And also the methodology that allows the integration of different perspectives of the key players that are participating. We always talk about conflicts, right? About players that don't necessarily have the same position regarding the assets and the resources that are being worked on or that are being planned. There's also a perspective in order to make a prospective, so that we need to reflect upon throughout the groups that are participating what are the largest issues and where will they happen in the future. This knowledge integration of experience with the expert will give you the potential to drive action from a very specific and local level up until regional levels or wider politics on production, policies on production that need to involve people that this is being directed to. We have a wide range of projects that have been developed, from Atlas cyber mapping Atlas, that talk about the occupation of the territory and what are the changes that will be seen. How will the community be affected in the future? And also some other processes that have allowed us to place events such as hurricanes, their trajectories, and how the population is organized from the vulnerable places in order to tend to emergencies. In this case, where many institutions in the country and communities, which is the relocation of people who are in zones that are at risk. This requires this participation. And there are many examples that you can research in the Geo Center from the experience that we have in these projects to a wide bibliography. You can see examples of participatory systems and attention to these conflicts of interests of the agents that need to be fundamental to drive the decisions, to guide the decisions that impact so many communities from the local to global. So this is the orientation that we need to foresee. that we have the knowledge models and the bridges that we can establish between the local knowledge and the wider processes at regional level. I don't know if this answers your questions. Concrete examples I will invite you to. We weren't able to present them to you, but please, we do have a wide range of efforts that have this approach. Thank you very much. Because of time, we need to conclude this session. I want to give some recognition to the speakers.